Hello and welcome to the training. It is writing coach Kevin T. Johns here, and it is my job to help aspiring authors get their ideas out of their heads onto the page and into readers' hands. And I want to thank you for joining me on this training video today. I'm so excited. You've made an awesome choice by watching this presentation. You're going to learn a lot, but we're also going to have some fun, because that's how I like to roll. And when it comes to marketing, we can't take ourselves too seriously. We gotta find some fun in here. And let's have some fun in this training as well. So let's go over the agenda for today. We're gonna look at what are book blurbs? Why are they important? Where can you use book blurbs? How can you spot influencers to give you these blurbs? What should your outreach email to influencers look like? And how can you get the best results possible? Now, before we get into the training, I will let you know a little bit about who I am so that you don't think I'm just some Yahoo off the street. I have a book called Smash Fear and Write Like a Pro for authors, and another writing instructional book called The Novel Writer's Blueprint. I have a young adult horror novel called The Page Turners and its sequel, The Page Turners Economy of Fear. I also have a young adult thriller called M School. In addition to these books, I have a children's book. I have 3 young daughters, so I absolutely had to do a picture book. And Rocket Princess versus Snaggletooth the Dragon is my picture book. And my most recent book is Novel Advice, Motivation, Inspiration, and Creative Writing Tips for Aspiring Authors. So as you guys can imagine, after releasing 7 books, I've gotten some practice at this whole book launch thing. And in fact, when we released Novel Advice, we did a free launch and we managed to hit number 1 on Amazon. So that was great. I also host a podcast. You might know me from there. It's called The Writing Coach. I also often moderate panels at conventions and workshops. And of course, I am a writing coach. That's the capacity I'm here today as your instructor to teach. So let's get into it. What are we talking about here when we watch a presentation called The Beauty of Book Blurbs? There's a lot of alliteration in there, I know. Well, a book blurb is a short description of a book, movie, or other product written for promotional purposes. So essentially, it's a piece of copywriting that you can use to help sell your book. Now, at least in America, it is believed that Walt Whitman's collection Leaves of Grass was the first book to actually use a book blurb. So after the initial first edition of the book was released, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote to Whitman. He sent him a letter and he said, "Congratulations, I greet you at the beginning of a great career." And so about a year later, in a very smart marketing move, Walt Whitman took those comments and put them on the spine of the second edition of Leaves of Grass. And with that, book blurbs were born. So if we could whittle this down to the most simple concept possible, a blurb is just a mini review from an influencer. And an influencer is someone who can influence other people to purchase your book. And if you're curious about the etymology of the word blurb itself, it's pretty interesting. You can actually trace where it comes from right down to a specific moment in time. So in 1906, Gillette Burgess presented his book at a publishing convention. Yes, even, 120 years ago, we were having publishing conventions. And at these conventions, he shared a piece of marketing for his book, Are You a Bromad? And in it, as you can see here, he had Miss Belinda Blurbs announcing what a great book his book was. And that word has stuck. So to this day, we still call these book-related endorsements blurbs. Now, why are blurbs important? On the most basic level, book blurbs are just book reviews. And as I'm sure you guys know, book reviews are hugely important as a form of social proof. But the blurbs that we're talking about here are different than your average reader Amazon review. Book blurbs from influencers are a unique form of social proof that allow you as an author to benefit from someone else's authority, and audience. And that is why they're so important. Now, where can you use book blurbs? Well, first off, on sales pages. This is a great place to convince people to purchase your book. Here's the sales page for my last book, Novel Advice. And you'll see right here at the top, right above my buy the ebook now call to action, is a book blurb. And as you scan down, I've got tons of reviews throughout this sales page. So there's one example of where you can use these reviews. On your Amazon page for the book, you also have the opportunity to reuse those same testimonials. Here is the sales page on Amazon for Novel Advice. And if we scan down right here, there's a section called Editorial Reviews. And as you'll see, I've filled this up with all of these blurbs that influencers have provided for my book. Another great place to use blurbs is right there on your front cover. Right here, we're looking at my book, Economy of Fear, and you'll see right on the front cover, I have a blurb from another author, which will hopefully help to sell that book. Now, the back cover is another great place to put blurbs to use, as well as actually inside the book, in its front matter itself. You'll find a lot of traditionally published mainstream bestsellers, when they come out in paperback, will have a ton of testimonials of blurbs right there inside the first few pages of the book's front matter. Blurbs are also great for marketing material. So whether you're doing a media kit for your book, whether you're doing sales and marketing emails that you're sending out to your email list, or whether you're producing content for social media, all of that is a great place where you can put wonderful blurbs about your work to use. So if blurbs are recommendations from influencers, that probably leads you to ask the question, well, where do I find influencers? I remember when I published my first book and I started to go online and learn about marketing, I'd see everywhere they'd say, well, just, get in contact with influencers and develop relationships with influencers. And I was always like, who are these people? How am I supposed to know who the influencers are? Well, the answer here is research. It is going to take a little bit of work on your part. A influencer isn't just going to knock on your door one day and say, hey, can I write a blurb for your upcoming book? You're going to need to do some work. So let's talk about some strategic ways that you can go about researching influencers. One is to just research the big names in your genre if you're a fiction author, or in your niche if you're a nonfiction writer. And Amazon and Goodreads are the first place to start with that. So let's say you're getting ready to publish a young adult horror novel and you're looking for some influencers in that genre. Well, pop on over to Goodreads, type young adult horror into the search bar, as I have done here, and hundreds of well-reviewed and popular young adult horror novels are going to pop up. And look at this. Out of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 of the top 5 books coming up in Goodreads are by Jackson Dean Chase. There's a very good chance that Mr. Jackson Dean Chase is an influencer in the young adult horror genre. He's got 3 books here ranking pretty well. That might be someone that you'd want to reach out to if you were getting ready to publish a young adult horror book. That's the Goodreads technique. If you pop over to Amazon, you'll see there are top bestseller lists for all sorts of different genres. So again, all I did was looked up teen and young adult horror ebooks, and I got a list here of some of the best-selling and well-reviewed books in that genre. And again, it didn't take long to notice that of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4 of them were by L. Ron Kong. So again, if I was getting ready to publish a young adult horror novel, L. Ron Kong might be someone I might want to start looking at in terms of an influencer who I could potentially connect with and eventually get a blurb from somewhere down the road. Now, another great place to find influencers are coaches, teachers and trainers like Audrey and myself in your particular genre and niche. Regardless of what you're writing, there's probably experts out there already teaching that subject. And those people, if they're making a living doing it, generally have a fairly large audience. So that's another easy way to spot some influencers. Now, here's a secret hack. I love this one. Here's a perfect way to find influencers. Conferences and online summits. Conferences are essentially a collection of influencers. Every workshop, every presentation, every keynote speech is given by someone who's already been identified by someone else as an influencer. Your work has already been done for you. For example, you're part of the Author Transformation Alliance, which means you're obviously interested in book marketing. Maybe somewhere down the road someday, you're going to decide that you want to write a book about book marketing. Well, how would you find influencers to get in contact with? Well, here's an example. There was something called the Publishing Success Summit about a year ago, where 86 different experts gave talks. And so all you have to do is a little bit of research. You're going to be able to find these sorts of events, and then you could just scan down and look at this. Every single one of these people here is an expert and an influencer that you could reach out. And I particularly, I like this guy here. He's a handsome fella. You might want to reach out to him. The point being, online summits, conferences are a great way to have someone else do that research for you and to just find a collection of potential influencers. Podcasts are another wonderful way to find influencers. I host a podcast called The Writing Coach, as I mentioned earlier in this video. And on that show, I speak with people who work with writers. So if you were publishing a book about writer's craft or how to coach authors or something like that, my podcast archives would be a great place where you could come over here and see almost 70 different episodes of interviews with people who I've already identified as influencers and gotten in contact with. So again, that's a great way to find people who you want to have on your radar. Now, if you're someone who has already built a mailing list, already built a platform of some kind, already have a following, your followers are also a great resource. Send an email to your email list. Ask your podcast listeners, who should I be getting in contact with? Who do you think is doing similar work to me? And again, this is another way of leveraging the resources that you already have at your disposal to do your research for you. And a final type of person you want to keep an eye out for are connectors. And connectors are different from influencers. Influencers generally have a large following, a large platform, or an established platform that they can use to recommend you to their audience. Connectors, on the other hand, are expert networkers. They're the people who know everyone. So if you can find and develop a relationship with a connector in your niche or your genre, they're likely going to be able to introduce you to a plethora of excellent people. All right, so now you know how to find influencers. We're going to move on to how are you going to reach out to those influencers? How are you going to email them and actually ask for a blurb? It's not easy. So that's why templates can be really important, especially if you're sending out lots and lots of emails making these requests. And for the template here, I'm going to go right to book marketing expert Tim Grahl. He has a great course called Launch a Bestseller, and in it he talks about outreach emails to influencers. And this is what he says: get to the point. No more than 4 or 5 sentences. This is all your outreach email needs to say. Introduce yourself and let the influencer know that you have a book coming out. Let them know why you're reaching out to them specifically, okay? And this is where, again, you're going to have to do a little bit of work. This isn't some sort of blanket spam email you're going to send out to 100 people at once. You are going to craft these emails individually. You're going to say, hey, so-and-so, I know that you've done such and such, which makes me think you're going to resonate with my book. So let them know why you think they're going to like it. And then just ask for the blurb. Say to them, hey, I would like a blurb to use for marketing purposes. Would you be up for that? Simple as that. And while your initial instinct might be to do some long email where you tell them the story of your life and all the reasons why this book is great, the thing you need to understand is that when you are asking an influencer to blurb your book, their influence is only one thing that they're sharing with you. There's something much more precious that they're sharing with you, and that's their time. It takes time to read a book. It takes time to craft a blurb, and time is the most precious resource for most people, especially influencers who have a lot of demands on them. So you want to show them that you respect their time by getting to the point and really just telling them, hey, I have a book that I think you would like for this reason. Would you be up for giving me a blurb? All right, so we've covered why these blurbs are important, how you might use them. We've talked about how you can spot influencers, and you now have a template to write those emails to do the outreach. The only thing that is going to stop you now is fear. Fear always brings its head up. It's always lurking in the closets. It's always out there. And I know for myself, asking for help is one of the biggest hurdles I have to overcome on my own path to success. It is not easy to identify influencers and then reach out to them and say, hey, would you dedicate a bit of your time to helping me out? It's not easy. It's not scary. And of course, the biggest fear of all is that fear of no. What is going to happen if you do take the risk, do the research, send the email, ask for a blurb, and someone you highly respect says no? What is that experience like? Well, let's look at a case study here where that actually happened to me. I sent out a lot of different outreach emails requesting blurbs for my last book. Here's the exact email of what happened on one of the no's that I got. The author or the person I was reaching out to, her name wasn't Jane. I've changed her name, but everything else here is exactly as I sent it out, okay? And this is how it played out. Hey, Jane. Kevin Johns from the Writing Coach podcast here. How's everything going on your end? I hope all is well as we move into summer. I have a new book coming out next month. It's called Novel Advice, Motivation, Inspiration, and Creative Writing Tips for Aspiring Authors. I was hoping you might be able to give it a read and provide me with an endorsement blurb I can use for marketing. If you are too busy, I totally understand, but in case you can squeeze it in, I've attached Mobi and EPUB copies here. It's about 18,000 words, so not too long. Cheers and all the best, Kevin. So that's the email that I sent out, and this is the email that I received in reply. Hey, Kevin. Sorry, I won't be able to get to this. I've had some health issues I'm dealing with, but I wish you the best of luck with the book. So exciting. Jane. To which I responded, hey, Jane, no worries at all. I'm sorry to hear you aren't feeling well. Wishing you lots of rest and good vibes. Cheers. Kevin. So what's the lesson to be learned here? It's no big deal unless you make it a big deal. Be respectful. Get to the point. And if people say no, it probably has nothing to do with you. It probably has to do with the demands they have on them. Maybe they're dealing with health. Maybe they just have too many balls in the air that they're juggling at this moment. The point is, you don't have to take it personal. You don't have to act like it's a big deal. You're going to get some yeses and you're going to get some no's along the way. And as rock and roll granny here says, hey, it's no big deal. Just keep on rocking. So do not let fear and insecurity and doubt prevent you from doing the outreach that you need to do to make your book a success. Now, speaking of success, let's talk about results. What are the things you can do to ensure that you get more yeses than nos when you do send out your outreach emails? Well, we're going to get into some pretty basic marketing stuff here, which is essentially that cold outreach equals poor results. If you have never spoken to Stephen King before, if you aren't friends with Stephen King, if you haven't developed some relationship with him, probably over several years, it's very unlikely Stephen King is going to agree to blurb your next book. Blurbing is very much like marketing in that people buy from who they know, who they like, and who they trust. You know, you guys are in a marketing program here in Author Transformation Alliance. I'm sure this is nothing new to you, but the truth is people also blurb for who they know, who they like, and who they trust. So getting great marketing blurbs and getting a great response to the emails that you send out, like so much of book marketing and marketing in general, it's really about relationships. It is about developing relationships over the long term so that when the time comes, you have built enough value that you can make that ask and that you can ask someone to take 3 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours to read your book and provide you with a blurb. So as an example of what I'm talking about, let's pop back to the sales page for Novel Advice and let's look at who ultimately ended up giving me great blurbs that I could use in my marketing. Right up at the top here, we have a blurb from Jason B. Ladd. He is an author who I was in a training program with. So I got to know him through that program. And actually, he was getting ready to release a book at the same time I was getting ready to release Novel Advice. So he provided me a great blurb for Novel Advice, and I was able to provide him with a blurb for his book that was coming out. Derek Murphy, he's a well-known book cover designer and now a very successful author. He also runs a great blog called Creative Indie. I had actually hired Derek many years ago to do the cover for my second novel, The Page Turner's Economy of Fear. And so Derek knew me through having worked with him previously, and he gave me a great review. Charlotte Rains Dixon is someone I had on my podcast many years ago and stayed in contact with throughout the years because I liked her so much. Monica Leonel was another writing instructor who I had on my podcast and who I got to know through featuring her on my show. Carolyn Frechette is an author and a publisher and a writing coach from the same city that I'm from. And so when I was going to a lot of book conventions and a lot of writing conventions and workshops to sell my work and promote my stuff and give talks, I was often running into Carolyn. And so we ended up becoming friends and we ended up sharing tables at conventions and doing different work together over the years. So again, this is someone I've developed a relationship with over the long term. And so she was more than happy to provide me with a blurb for my book. Susan Friedman hosts a podcast I'm sure you guys would love. It's called the Book Marketing Mentors Podcast. She's also an author, and she had me on her show. I had her on mine, and we developed a friendship. Tom Morkis is a book launch expert. I took a course of his called Publisher's Empire, so he knew me as one of his students, and he was more than willing to give me a great blurb. Doug Kurtz. Doug Kurtz was a friend of my business coach. So as I was learning how to build not just an author career, but also a career as a writing coach and a writing instructor, I was working with a business coach who also knew Doug, who was a writing coach. And so he introduced Doug and I. So again, through working with my mentor, my business coach, I was able to expand my network and meet Doug, who gave me one of my favorite blurbs here of all. And then Chase Reeves. Chase Reeves isn't even really from the world of publishing or writing, but he runs a very popular website called Fizzle.co, which is a training site for entrepreneurs. And I was actually a member of that site for several years. So by being a part of that website, I got to know Chase. We got to develop a bit of a relationship. And when the time came, he was happy to give me a great review about my book and about my writing. So that's just an example of all these wonderful reviews that I got from my book, Novel Advice, were all the result of long-term relationship development, of me not doing cold outreach, but doing warm and hot outreach to people who are already part of my network. And that's why book review blurbs aren't something you should only be thinking about in that month before you release your book and you're gearing up for your big launch, but rather something you're thinking about and working on through the months and years leading up to the release of your book. So let's review what we've covered in today's presentation. We've talked about how a book blurb is a short description of a book written by an influencer for promotional purposes. We've talked about how book blurbs are an important part of book marketing because they allow authors like you to benefit from someone else's authority and audience. They can be used in a variety of places, including book covers, front and back, sales pages, marketing material, and on your Amazon pages. Influencers can be identified through some good old-fashioned research. And outreach or emails should be simple and to the point. You want to show that you respect people's time. Finally, reaching out to warm relationships is a vital component of garnering positive responses to your outreach email. So getting book blurbs isn't something you do at the last minute. It is part of your ongoing marketing work as an author, building a career and an audience and a platform. And the thing I want to leave you guys with, the reason I chose this topic to present to you is that I really think book blurbs is one of the most fun, beautiful, energetic parts of book marketing. I don't really consider myself a book marketing expert. I generally teach the craft side of things. So like you, I'm not always necessarily comfortable with the process of selling and with the process of book marketing, but I can tell you the process of identifying people who you respect, who you want to be associated with, who you look up to, having the guts to ask them for a little bit of support and then getting positive feedback from them is so fun, so wonderful, so beautiful, and so motivating. It might just be the thing that you need as you're leading up to a book launch, because as you're leading to a launch, you're scared, you're nervous, there's a million balls in the air, and you're wondering, is this thing actually any good at all? Is it going to sell? Are people going to like it? And I can tell you, getting 5 or 10 or a dozen reviews from people that you respect where they say really nice things about your book is really rewarding in and of its own. Regardless of whether your book sells 1 million copies or sells 1 copy, having a dozen people who you respect say that it's a great book is something no one can ever take away from you. And so I highly encourage you not to skip this portion of your book marketing. It is the part of book marketing that I have found most rewarding, most enjoyable, and I hope that this presentation has helped you learn how it can be that same experience for you. So guys, if you enjoyed this, I'd love to hear from you. Pop by www.kevintjohns.com. That's where I work. That's where all of my material is, my podcast and my courses and my blog posts and everything. I would love to hear from you, and I wish you all the best in your book marketing journey. We'll talk soon.